I get a lot of questions about dragons, and the question I'm asked more than any other is, what are the challenges we face when dragons begin to use public transportation? So let's examine the screenwriting of Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves in this week's Analytical Filmmaking Analysis of the Week. By the way, this is a segment from the Carl King podcast. If you enjoy this video, remember to like, subscribe, and send us burritos. This week's Analytical Filmmaking Analysis of the Week is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, directed by and screenwrited by Too Many Cooks. In my totally subjective personal opinion, I did not like this movie, but instead of just complaining, I've decided to use some positive reframing and turn it into a creative writing exercise. I'm going to point out what I see as 3 major writing problems and do my best to offer 3 solutions. And yes, I know, I've never written a $150 million movie under the bureaucratic pressure of a corporate studio. But here's what Carl King would do differently if I were somehow solely in charge of making this Dungeons & Dragons movie. And one more thing. What we're talking about here is an intentionally Type 1 work of art. So everything I'm calling a problem might only be considered a problem within the confines of that Type 1 style. Number 1, the teaser problem. Teasers are the opening scene of a movie or TV show, and they are meant to hook you, convey the genre and tone, and make you want to watch more. So an adventure story should probably have an adventurous teaser, but the teaser here is a half-orc being loaded into a maximum security prison. And it has nothing to do with the rest of the story or plot. It's slow, and it goes on for 3 minutes, which is very bad within the context of a Type 1 movie. The only action that happens is at the very end of the movie, where Michelle Rodriguez breaks his legs or something. So with a $150 million budget, they spent, on average, $1.1 million per minute of that movie. So that scene theoretically was worth $3.3 million to introduce a half-orc character who never shows up again. Was that the best possible idea for a teaser? Probably not. So, what is a possible solution? I would consider spending that $3.3 million on an opening scene that is high energy, plot-related, and genre-appropriate. I might try to make it all about those red wizards casting the beckoning death spell, which would kill the main character's wife and set the story in motion. And number 2, the frame story problem. So after that 3-minute teaser and another 1-minute scene that didn't seem to accomplish much, we get Chris Pine telling a story that happened somewhere else. And oh boy, it's 8 minutes of narrated exposition over a montage flashback. That's right, the interesting stuff worth telling isn't happening in the present, in the room where the characters actually are. And for me, that's always a writing red flag. In his famous memo to the writers of The Unit, David Mamet said, "Anytime 2 characters are talking about a third, the scene is a crock of S." So I always try to remember that if what's happening now isn't interesting enough, maybe the story is about the wrong thing or just started in the wrong spot. So if the most interesting stuff happened a long time ago, maybe set the story a long time ago, because once you go back in time, the story loses urgency and momentum. So because of that structure, the inciting incident here happens at 28 minutes 33 seconds when Chris Pine says, "We have to get into that castle and take her out ourselves." And there it is. The plot has been stated. But the total length of this movie is 2 hours, 15 minutes. So at that point, almost 1/4 of the movie has already gone by with nothing much happening in the here and now, except a lot of talking. But this is a Type 1 movie, which means it's all about the plot. And unfortunately, it takes a half an hour to get the plot in motion. And you can compare that to, arguably, the most successful medieval adventure movie of all time, The Big Lebowski, a movie that's only 18 minutes shorter than Dungeons and Dragons. The inciting incident in that movie occurs in the second scene, only 3 minutes, 45 seconds in. And by 9 minutes, 45 seconds, the dude already decides to take action. So back to Dungeons and Dragons. We're half an hour in, and Act 2 begins, and now they start to assemble the team. And it is like storytelling quicksand. Like, where are we going to find a thief? Oh, I know one. Where are we going to find a druid? I know one. And that makes me wonder, if you really want to have that many characters, what if they already knew each other? So there would be no need for all the go here, go there, who am I, who are you? This whole second act is less like a story and more like a list of errands. Then the flashback problem happens again later on when the paladin character narrates the backstory of the evil red female wizards. Now, why not have that happen in the present? Maybe the red wizards are currently going from city to city and devouring souls with their beckoning death stuff. And as I said, you could make that the opening. So here's a possible solution. For a Type 1 story like this, I would try to condense it down to a shorter timeline rather than referencing things way in the past. Maybe write it so that the major events all take place in as short of a time as possible. You can use trauma to give the story immediacy. So if the main character's wife is killed, make that happen today, not 2 years ago, as it happened in the finished movie. I would connect it with the Red Wizards and their spell, and I would start on that, hit that inciting incident early on, and just keep things moving. And number 3, implausibility problems. And the first one is, if she's really so evil and powerful, why didn't the Red Wizard lady just kill the main characters right there the first time that she had to deal with them? Instead, for some reason, she tells her idiot guards to take them out back into an alley and do it. But of course, she couldn't do it herself because the movie would be over. It's like those villains who always leave the room after setting a complicated torture device or timer to kill James Bond. And surprise, he escapes, and the movie continues. And the second implausibility problem, when defeating the evil wizard lady, the mage says that he countered her time stop spell so that Chris Pine's daughter could slip the anti-magic bracelet onto her wrist. But why didn't she use the bracelet and invisibility trick earlier, before the evil wizard lady could even have a chance to cast the time stop spell? And why didn't the evil wizard lady just use the time stop spell earlier? Why waste so much time? Maybe because the fight scene needed to be a spectacle with lots of special effects. And of course, for the sake of making the movie last longer, characters procrastinate on solving their problems. And the third implausibility problem, when the heroes escape the underwater cave, there's no way that they could have been swimming upwards out of the roof of the cave with a whole ocean of water rushing down into the opening. They would have been pushed all the way to the back of the Underdark, or whatever it's called, along with the chubby dragon. And the fourth implausibility problem, this is the most absurd of all. When they're sneaking into the castle, the mage gets the toe of his foot stuck on a brick floor. Now, how is that physically possible? They even show a close-up, and it makes no sense at all. You're probably thinking, Carl, this is a fantasy movie. There's magic and stuff. It's not meant to be realistic. Well, I'm about to address that. H.G. Wells once wrote, "As soon as the magic trick has been done, the whole business of the fantasy writer is to keep everything else human and real." And this is known as Wells's Law, and I'm a believer in it. It basically means all supernatural and magical elements aside, everything else in the fictional universe should obey the laws of everyday physics and psychology. Now, the problem with fixing these plausibility problems is that there's no easy solution. Those scenes would need to be entirely cut out or rewritten to be plausible. And my suggestion is to spend more time and just think these things through. As a writer, maybe put yourself into that physical and psychological situation. Like, if this happened, could that really happen? Ask yourself, would a person really say those lines of dialogue or behave like that? But this is what happens in plot-driven Type 1 movies when the writers paint themselves into a corner. They need to get the characters from A to Z, and they end up with a bunch of scenes in between that aren't plausible. But maybe Type 1 audiences don't care anyway because they're used to these implausibilities by now. Well, now I'm confused. If you like this video, support the creation of more by joining my Patreon for $1 or $5 a month. That's patreon.com/Carl King.